distinguished friends, leaders of your community, it is really an honor and a privilege to be with you here this morning, carrying greetings from the Holy Land, from Jerusalem, D.C., David's capital, our heart. And Jerusalem is the city where it all began, where our great prophets fought kings and empires for justice, for human rights, for truth. And indeed, Jerusalem is the cradle of our Judeo-Christian civilization, a civilization of justice and freedom. The Bible documents all of that. The Bible mentions Jerusalem 667 times. Zion, which is another name for Jerusalem, is mentioned in the Bible over 100 times, or 108 times. And when we fight for justice and salvation, Jerusalem is the symbol of that. Indeed, Jerusalem stands for all of that. As Isaiah said it, "For Zion's sake I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake I will not remain quiet, till her vindication shines out like the dawn, and her salvation like a blazing torch." Zionism is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people for the return from exile of Jews to Zion, to Jerusalem, in the fulfillment of the biblical prophecies. And a Zionist is every Jew who comes back to our ancient homeland, and everyone who promotes, supports, and fights for this historical endeavor of justice. Charles Krauthammer wrote in our 60th anniversary, he said, "It is the norm, the rule of every ancient people, to be defeated, destroyed, scattered and exiled, and disappear in the mists of history, with one exception. A miraculous story of redemption and return after not 100 years or 2 centuries, but 2,000 years. And remarkably, this miracle occurred in our time. You have stood by Israel in the good times, and at the time of our greatest difficulties, the state of Israel deeply appreciates your support. You know, there is an American song that I take great comfort every time I hear it. The lyrics come from a poem called "Defense of Fort McHenry." It was written in 1812, when America was just 30 years old. But this young nation was at a war once again to secure independence it had sacrificed so dearly to gain. Now, the song describes a 24-hour period during which thousands of Congreve rockets rained down on the city of Baltimore. Francis Scott Key's description of the rocket's red glare and the valor of citizens and soldiers, of course, became later the U.S. national anthem. And what was true 200 years ago is true today. No foreign government, no caliphate, no terrorist organization, and no missiles are ever going to deter any American from his freedom to worship, to speak the truth, to enjoy his independence, and to follow his faith. And no one in the world today is more grateful for America's leadership than the people of Israel. Our nation is small, about the size of New Jersey. Our population is small, about the size of Tennessee. Yet haters of democracy and Judeo-Christian values, numbering in the hundreds of millions, have identified Israel as the enemy. Make no mistakes. The rockets that are aimed at our schools and hospitals and playgrounds and old folks' homes are sent with one purpose. And this purpose is not speak up on behalf of just democratic freedom-loving principle. Their purpose is to annihilate the pillars upon which our shared Judeo-Christian values stand. Long before serving in the posts as Minister of my country's Homeland Security, Minister of National Infrastructure of Water and Energy, and these days Minister of Tourism, of the tourism sector, I had the privilege to study and completing my PhD in an American leading scientific university, MIT. But during my years there, I learned about technology and science, but I learned something far more important. I learned how dearly Americans hold to their values. And many years before the tragedy of 9/11, I served as a paratrooper's officer in the IDF in our defense forces. And in 1973, when I was still a student there, when the Yom Kippur War broke, I bought a ticket, I stopped my studies and joined my unit in the Battle of the Bridgehead and the crossing of the Suez Canal. I participated in more war as a paratrooper, and I mention all of that because the reestablishment of our ancient nation in 1948 was only the beginning of a long, difficult battle. The battle is not just for our land. It is the battle for the very survival of the Judeo-Christian values we share. And whether one is a friend or detractor of Israel, to frame it any other way is to deny irrefutable facts. And those facts are embodied in the very existence of organizations like ISIS, like Hamas, like Hezbollah. Our small country is surrounded by 22 hostile Islamic dictatorships with land masses 640 times our size, with 50 times our population. Neighboring Gaza is run by a brutal terrorist organization, Hamas, and it is nothing more than a launching pad for international terrorist operation. Between January and July last year, Hamas fired over 3,000 rockets at us until finally, after repeated warning and a degree of patience and discipline that no other nation on earth would exercise, we could stand by no longer. Hezbollah, the Iranian-backed terrorist organization in Lebanon, has over 100,000 heavy rockets pointed at us as I speak to you right now. And those rockets have no defensive purpose whatsoever. They exist for one reason. They're aimed at the citizens of Israel, but they're also aimed at everyone in this room who stands for humanity. So we are cultivating our ancient land. And yet we are being called expansionists, imperialists, occupiers, and apartheid state. Let's be frank. Occupiers take land that isn't theirs. Did we take a land that isn't ours? Well, we submit that no other nation on earth has ever had a thousands of years old deed to this land. No one has ever had a greater right to inhabit a land, not Syria, not the Palestinian Authority, not Hezbollah, not Hamas. Let me read you an excerpt from that deed. And in Genesis, we see, Genesis 13, and the Lord said to Abram, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward, for all the land which you see I give to you and to your descendants forever. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. I call on those who call us occupiers to show me a more compelling, competing claim to this land. Jerusalem, the eternal capital of Israel, is mentioned 667 times in the Bible. It is not even mentioned, not one time, in the Quran. Too many people, especially younger people, are being swayed by oft repeated, unsupported claims about Israel. Let them be swayed by challenges to this covenant if they wish. But should you encounter these people, I urge you to encourage them not to be naive, because these claims have little to do with Israel and its land. They are thinly veiled efforts to eradicate Judeo-Christian values from the face of the earth. To regard this as anything less is to abandon our shared faith. And in the Middle East today, you have the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization and the Jabhat al-Nusra and Ansar Bayt al-Maqdas and Abdullah Azam brigades and Islamic Jihad and Salafist and Hezbollah and ISIS and many more organizations. They are all affiliates and supporters of Al-Qaeda, Islamic Jihad, ISIS. In Central Africa, we have the Boko Haram terror organization and their atrocities, which are now spilling out of Nigeria into Niger and Cameroon and Mali. And in the Horn of Africa, we have the Shabab terrorists in Somalia, in Kenya. Well, and it extends and go on from there to Yemen and to the borderlands of Pakistan, all that in Asia and the Far East. Everywhere you look, militant Islam is on the march, rapidly spreading in every part of the world. The names of the different organizations are different, but all these organizations are members of one and the same family, Muslim Brotherhood. Yesterday, the beautiful presentations he had here, I heard it. I spoke later on to Frank Gaffney. We heard it yesterday night when he was speaking about that. And our Hamas terror organization in Gaza is their branch in Gaza. And their affiliates in Libya beheaded on video 21 Christians brought to their knees, dressed in orange, just a fortnight ago. Beheaded just for one reason, because they were Christians. And in the West, in places we know, as close and familiar like France, like England, there is an archipelago of nearly autonomous Islamist islands. Some have raised controversy by referring to it as no-go zones. But the fact is that many Muslim terrorists, well-trained, are returning from Syria to their countries in Europe, some to the US, in order to promote there the revolution of radical Islam. Just last month, in January, 3 Islamist gunmen, French-born, killed 17 people in a rage in Paris, which began with an attack of the Charlie Hebdo magazine. A week ago, in Copenhagen, a 22-year-old Danish-born Islamist fired as many as 40 bullets at a cafe hosting a free speech event. And then at a synagogue, murdering 2 just before being shot down by the police. I say all of that because the scope of the problem, the grand strategic objective of radical Islam, is to replace our Judeo-Christian values with the extreme rules of Sharia law. We should know that. And what has been the response, for example, in Europe just recently, in Paris? There was a huge rally with between 2 to 4 million participants, putting posters, "Je suis Charlie," I'm Charlie. At this time, a rally only. In Copenhagen, Danish leaders and politicians and media leaders issued forceful declarations. We shall never give in. We shall not be intimidated by terror. Let me say, what expressions of weakness. How easy is it to buy a comfortable pair of shoes and a good coat and join the rally, the happening? How easy is it to make declarations when what is needed is action? And there is yet another major problem, and this is the state of Iran. It is the most dangerous Islamist country. It shares the same objective against our Judeo-Christian civilization, but in addition to promote terror, they also develop nuclear capabilities. And they are within reach of autonomous decision to develop nuclear bombs. These very days, negotiations take place with Iran. The purpose should be clear, only one purpose, and this is to prevent Iran from the capability now and in the future to develop nuclear weapons. Because this combination of weapons of mass destruction in the hands of made ideology and Islamist terrorists is the most serious, dangerous danger to our Judeo-Christian civilization. And make no mistake, ISIS must be defeated. But to defeat ISIS and leave Iran as a threshold nuclear power is to win the battle, but lose the war. The prophet Ezekiel, in chapter 37, says, "Take a man from among them, and set him for their watchman. If, when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the horn and warn the people. I've set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore, when thou shalt hear the word of my mouth, warn them from me." Here in America, you and me, you are the watchmen. And it is our duty to blow the horn and warn the people against this gathering spoil. In the Middle East, that duty to defend Judeo-Christian values for all humanity falls on Israel. The reality is this, that the only place in the entire Middle East where Christians are safe, secure, and where they can worship freely is Israel. I should also mention that Christians have been driven out of the ancient city of Bethlehem. It is now dominated by the Palestinian Authority. About 20 years ago, when Israel was still controlling the area, Christians enjoyed a majority of over 85%. They now have diminished to an increasingly smaller and persecuted minority of less than 25%. And when they are asked, they are afraid to tell the truth about the persecution. The only country in the Middle East where the number of Christians has risen is Israel. And do you know why? Could you tell me why? It's because Israel is an island of democracy, an island of value, of freedom, of equality. In Paris, people went with this poster, "I'm Charlie, je suis Shirley." There is no one country in the Middle East that people can go on demonstrations and put a poster, "I'm a Christian," with one exception. In Israel, you can go every demonstration you like and put every sign, every poster you wish. Because we are proud to preserve the rights of all minorities. We are proud that everybody is free to believe. That's Israel in the Middle East. A Middle East which is becoming more religious, more extreme, more radical, with more terror organization, less and less friendly to the West, with more and more jihadists. It's a place where there is no mercy for the weak. And the only true ally of the United States, in particular in tough times in that area, is Israel. I should add that the most true ally of Israel in the United States is the evangelical community. Thank you. And yes, there is apartheid in the Middle East and in the archipelago in Europe, in the UK, where signs are posted saying you are entering a Sharia-controlled zone, Islamic rules enforced. These are zones where honor killings, domestic violence, child marriages, violence against non-Muslims are the norm. And there is, of course, apartheid in the Middle East against women, against minorities, against Jews, against Christians, against the right of the Jewish people to have a state of its own. There is apartheid in our countries, there is apartheid in the Palestinian Authority, and paradoxically, Israel is the safest place for an Arab in the Middle East. Of course for a Christian, of course for everybody, because Israel is a safe place. But Israel still fights for the right of the Jewish people to live in its homeland like all other peoples. And we are in a battle for our security and for peace. And the root cause for no negotiation for peace is the total refusal by the part of the Palestinians and Arab radicals to accept the very existence of Israel. And we are now facing also a propaganda world campaign for delegitimizing the right of Israel to exist. You have there a whole lie industry and suggestion for sanctions and boycotts and on and on. And we need you. And we need you, messengers of the Bible, to use your media to inform and advocate the historical justice of the Zionist endeavor. A month ago, I visited the Friends of Zion World Heritage Center that RJ mentioned before, that Dr. Mike Evans opened in Jerusalem this winter. It shares the story of hundreds of Christians who have supported the state of Israel. Let me say, perhaps once again, bring to your attention that our Prime Minister Netanyahu said, I don't believe that the Jewish state and modern Zionism would have been possible without Christian Zionism. And to the religious broadcasters, I say this, we need your support. And to the religious broadcaster, I say, we need your support now more than ever in the battle to defend free speech, to advance biblical truth, to shape public opinion. You do it in newspapers, on screens, in the internet, on the social networks, on radios. You excel in all of that. This arena is your calling and your expertise. The magic touch of your inner sense of mission is your gift. Well, you know, I'm also Minister of Tourism. So I invite you to visit Israel. The Bible is a living testimony and a GPS for the world's conscience, especially for the evangelical in relation to Israel. And I always love to repeat that GPS stands for God's positioning system. And the Holy Scriptures will position your heart and your feet in the Holy Land. One of the best ways to stand for Israel is to stand in Israel. And I invite you to visit Israel. 4,000 years of history are waiting to be discovered by your followers. Walk the paths of the Bible. Feel the sanctity of the past. Breathe its present. And pray and hope for the future to come back home different, inspired. If you experience Israel, you'll never be the same. And take my word for it. If you like the book, you'll love the country. I invite your audiences to come and experience the land of creation, to be part of building Israel as a strong nation. It is not only a visit. This is a statement of solidarity with our shared biblical values, with our resolve to defend freedom, with our shared hope for a safe future. And as you come and bless our nation, the Lord will bless you as well. As in Genesis it says, I will bless those who bless you. Shalom, and God bless you. Thank you.